What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I have DB here with me. We're going to go over BTC. He's going to take a look at some indexes, see what has happened, and make some plans for the future.
Hey guys, what's up? Good to be back with Woods on the charts. Let's get into it.
So from the last time that we talked, a lot of your analysis was pretty much on point. Our higher time frame vision and scope of things was really reflective of the sort of price action that we saw as of recent. Obviously, it's hard to predict significant moves and breaks like this. When it comes to higher time frame standpoint of things, we really did this price action justice. Especially, I mean, even if you were just cautious on this move down and not trying to knife catch everything in between, it was a good sign, especially with USDT pumping upwards. I do want to talk about what I'm seeing here on BTC first before we do jump into some of the index talk that you have for us today. I'm looking at this on the higher time frame here on the monthly. I saw this happening from this sort of price action up here when we were trading at all-time highs for BTC. We were trading and we punched up this level 4 times. So 4 months we had to short this level. And this just goes to show you just how choppy it gets at these points of inflection, and price eventually reacted and rejected from this level, respecting the trend that it was given, right? Each and every time. So what I'm looking at now from the opposite end of things, especially since we broke down and lost the low outside of the range that we were previously chopping in between, we held this level one time, and we look to put in a higher low here. Before we were trading in this range for quite some time here, printed this flag, and eventually continuated that bear flag to the downside. Now that we lost this level and we aggressively rejected, I'm gonna now assume that price is gonna eventually look to travel towards the low end of this wick potentially. And I don't want to be a doomsday caller and calling for anything drastic, but I want to be logical and what could potentially happen here. So we obviously have this uptrend here. It's a little bit more steep than the one that I have below it. But if we were to hold anywhere in between these two levels here, I would say the 76 and this 60.8, then it would be that 64 to 63 level. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But if we do reject and we don't hold in between towards the low end of this wick, I'm going to anticipate us actually rejecting this trend. That does not mean that we could immediately reject and continue drastically towards 34K, but that is a potential at hand. For us to assume that this trend is going to hold and, you know, that's going to be it, is for us to be thinking one-sided. And I think that two directions are in play right here. Clearly, sellers are in control. Lower time frame, if you are a buyer and we do see an influx, obviously that could push price really quickly. But when sellers hop in, we see an absolute elevator to the downside. So staircase up, elevator down until proven otherwise. Once we reclaim 74.4, I'm going to call it this 76K range here, we don't really have any sufficient sort of confirmation for us to anticipate more upside. On the lower time frame, I do like this low sweep that we had today, and I was already looking to long 66.5. I was long 66.5 in the morning. We did hold this 66.5, which on the 1 hour is going to be this hourly level of demand for a push up into the Monday low, which was a good TP1 spot. And we are now sweeping below this 4-hour candle wick low, and we're still holding above it. So I'm still watching for a reaction and a potential push into the Monday range, which could then push us up to the Monday high and give us new triggers for shorts. If we do lose this low, which was my immediate invalidation, that's 66.1 low, then I'm going to anticipate us either retesting and holding around the 63.7K pocket, or for us to just go down and retest the lows. These are my immediate sort of potential that I'm looking for to react on. And until my levels hit, I have no need to step in between. I've taken some shorts to start the week. I took a long to start the week as well. Closed my short at this level, so I'm not really positioned for much. I did take a little long at 66.1, 60 because my market bot longed it. But other than that, this is pretty much what I'm looking at. We have a very steep trend downwards, especially when we're looking at this most recent wick that we had, and we recovered up towards the most recent level of rejection. So we want to see how this resolves. and it's going to resolve one of two ways from here. It's extremely slow and controlled to start the week, but things can change as CPI comes. That's pretty much what I got, DB. I want to hear your thought process and see if you agree with my stuff and see what you have.
All right, lovely analysis. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I do agree with many things that you said. So let me just go over BTC on multiple timeframes here and discuss a few things that are relevant after last week's move. So first of all, we have to say that we did cover the higher timeframe bear flag for BTC, respectively the bull flag for USDT dominance, which both ended up breaking down, respectively breaking up for USDT dominance, leading to a very strong move in the market. So good that we covered that, but let's see what has happened with the key levels and the structure for BTC after that move. So we did make it all the way to 60K, but have now strong resistance above us at 72K, all the way up, I would say, towards April 2025 low. So I would say 72 to 78, 79K is pretty strong resistance. I'm personally positioned in spot here with the group as well in BTC and Ethereum. We did take some profits here as a TP1 because it was the lower end of my resistance zone, and the further we grind up into this zone here, the more I will be taking profits in the next few days or weeks if we make it all the way up there. But we have to understand that we have rejected for now, right? So for now, this is a bearish retest, and logically we can be testing multiple levels of this candle basically here. My most ideal scenario to position into BTC again, in case I'm stopped break even, would actually be a sweep of the lows, and for us to get a daily bullish divergence. So that would be something at around 63, possibly down towards 58K in the worst case scenario, a short term, right? There are obviously, as you said, some interesting areas for a higher low, including anything between 64 and 63, which is also your zone of interest. If I get some lower time frame divergences, I'll certainly be trying those as well. But as I'm a higher time frame trader, and as I'm already in BTC from a bit lower, my most ideal scenario to be adding would be, as I said, a higher time frame bullish divergences for BTC. On the greater scheme of things, looking at something like the weekly, I think it's very important to discuss a little bit about the macro structure for BTC, because it always helps us to understand what we could expect in a few weeks or months from now. What we basically had over the last 3.5 years is a very strong uptrend, right? We talked about it before. Higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs. We did break down of this trend a few weeks ago after we printed a weekly bearish divergence. After that, we not only lost this diagonal trend line, but we also lost a very important weekly level on the RSI that has been serving as support. And we also fell below the weekly 21 EMA and weekly 50 SMA, all things that we already covered, right? There's another thing now that adds confluence to the macro thesis and to the idea that we could actually be trading a bit lower throughout this year, which in my view is a very important fact, which is that on the weekly, the 2 weekly, and the monthly, we have now printed a lower low, right? Which is very obvious if you look at this here. So this is a structure that we need to cover, and it aligns with what we said about a resistance zone being between 72 and 78, right? But with this lower low here, I'm going to assume that we will be printing some form of lower high, again, closer to 80K at some point, which then would send us to what I consider a very strong and good long-term DCA zone for BTC from 45 to 30K. Is it guaranteed to happen? Obviously not. This is the most ideal scenario, assuming that this change of structure is gonna continue to print lower lows throughout the next few months, probably around Q3, Q4 2026. And it might sound bearish, it might sound negative, but I think that would be one of the biggest buying opportunities that you've got since the FTX crash. You want to be buying at the bottom or close to the bottom of a macro downtrend, right? And we did have macro downtrends before. What is important is that you acknowledge the trend, you respect the trend, and you play the key levels, not only assuming one direction only, right? I'm longing, I'm shorting all the time, but on the greater scheme of things, I understand the trend, and I think the trend can send us a bit lower next few weeks and months. Looking at some indexes, don't want to complicate it too much. I just want to look at total market cap, USDT dominance, and the others index. And I think that should do it for today. So for total market cap, we have discussed the breakdown of this trend for a while. We did have a bearish retest here when BTC tested the 98K zone, and the breakdown after that has been pretty aggressive. We did have a bear flag here as well, obviously, since we had it on BTC as well. It kind of mimics the price action. What I see here is that we have lost April lows just like BTC, which is this middle green box where we did have a bearish retest when BTC reached 72K. So this is a very, very big zone that eventually we need to reclaim for a move higher. Else, if we don't get that, I'm trying to align new buys with this zone for total market cap, which is at 1.9 trillion, which would be my next ideal buy zone for a swing. But overall, the index remains in a macro downtrend. We also printed here a lower low on the weekly, which is something that we need to acknowledge as well. For USDT dominance, we did reach a very, very big zone, which is why I've scaled into BTC and Ethereum in the last drop of the market. We did discuss this 3-day bull flag. We got a nice expansion after the breakout, reaching all the way to 2023, 2022 highs. And I assume that this is not going to break on the first attempt. Now, this is a very, very important macro zone, because if we start finding acceptance above this area, we're going into a new all-time high for this index. Sort of the same situation that we had at 2022 cycle lows, right? And if that happens, then we can assume a further expansion of the index in the next few weeks and months. I think it is possible, not instantly. As I said, we're now below this macro resistance, so I'm still in spot. Maybe we get another retest of this diagonal trend line here, which is where I would be taking some major profits if we get there, and if this aligns more with BTC at 77, 78, 79, maybe even 80s. So this is a very, very important zone. Else, what we could be looking at is if we get another sweep of this higher end, get a higher time frame bearish divergence, which could be a good buy signal, sort of as we had here when we had a 3-day bearish divergence, had the move from 80K towards 98K, which was a good relief rally. So if we get something like this here again, I will be assuming that we get a nice relief rally once again. But overall, I still think that this index is in a strong macro uptrend, very, very similar price action to the last macro downtrend, also known as the last bear market. So I'm going to respect it until I see some macro reversal signals for this index, but for BTC as well. And lastly, what I think is a very, very important chart is the others index. We've been warning, we've been cautioning about altcoin exposure, that it's not the time to be accumulating alts for the next run, right? It is important to acknowledge how others looks, how total 2 and total 3 look. But in this case, others referring specifically to mid caps. In my view, we have lost a very, very important higher time frame support level that has been serving as support for mid caps in the last 2 years. We closed the weekly below it, so I'm going to assume that any retest closer to this area will be a bearish retest for altcoins. That means that yes, short-term altcoins can always rise, but I don't see a higher time frame uptrend coming anytime soon for altcoins. And as long as we find acceptance, or we hold the acceptance below this area, and my main assumption will be that we will get this breakdown here and go all the way towards 130 billion, and maybe even go all the way down to sub 100 billion for mid caps, which is a very reasonable assumption to make considering the lower low on BTC, and assuming that the trend is going to continue for a few more weeks or months. So I'm going to respect the trend as long as it is showing me that a reversal cannot happen, right? At some point, obviously, as I said, many buying opportunities are coming, so don't want to be bearish for too long, but the downtrend is very strong right now, and any pop higher for me will be for taking profits. And again, positioning short, especially on altcoins. But that doesn't mean that you position short on altcoins when the market is dropping. It's always good to wait for euphoria to come back in, because now we're facing with max fear, right? And you don't want to be shorting aggressively when the market is fearful. You want to be shorting these higher time frame bearish retests where a little bit of hope comes in, but realistically speaking, you're only getting lower highs on these indexes. So this is pretty much what I got on the market. Don't want to complicate it further. I think everything discussed already gives you a pretty good idea on where we stand in the market. So long story short, still think that we are in a macro downtrend. Still think that we can be reaching lower levels this year. That doesn't mean that we cannot get relief rallies. In fact, relief rallies in macro downtrends are very, very strong. We have seen it in the last cycle as well. For example, here we got 100% moves on many altcoins, and we already had pretty good moves on altcoins here. And if we form another bear flag here, I think we're going to get some good reliefs across the market. But it is important, as I said, to acknowledge the trend and at least be prepared in case it continues further down. So that's all I have to say about the market for now.
Beautiful analysis as always, DB. Always a pleasure having you on.
Pleasure talking to you again, Woods. I hope you guys find this helpful, and I'll talk to you in the next market overview video.
CPI in a few days, guys. Remember to stay patient, stay calculated, trust your levels, trust your analysis, and don't overcomplicate the middle. Big opportunities coming, and you don't want to get caught in between. I'll see you guys in the next. Peace.